Hey, Ian, welcome back to the show. Give us a little update on yourself.
Brian, great to be back. Great to have the opportunity. I watch your content all the time with interest. It's always engaging. So I last time we spoke, I'd spent coming up for 4 years selling to sales leaders, selling VoIP systems telephony. I've now moved on, and I'm now in sales motivation and gamification technology. So helping sales leaders again. But in that new sales enablement space, particularly pertinent, I think, in the remote working world we've got, right, where the management of salespeople and the engagement with your team changed 12 months ago. I know we spoke during that period, and we're still here.
Yep, cool. And are you selling to the same persona?
Yeah. So pretty much sales leaders, people who care about driving sales metrics in the business and outcomes. So, people leading SDR teams, mostly now more than field sales teams. It's that inside sales, telesales, SDR, recruitment companies, people who are driving. They've got those people who need to book business for them.
Yeah. And what are you hearing from sales leaders? What are their top issues?
Well, as usual, one of the top issues is more leads, right? And one of the ones I've seen though that's developed over the past year is how do I engage my sales? How do I know what my sales team's doing? Are they doing the right things? How do I coach them? Because I can't, particularly with an SDR, I can't walk around the office. I can't do that management by wandering around the MBWA and overhear things. And they're not over. Here's the worst one, I think. The individuals, I've always believed, it's great to put someone here amongst, you choose where you sit them between a couple of champions who've been here a few years, the new joiner, and they learn by osmosis, right? Because they overhear things, or they can just lean over. And I've just had them on the line, and they can quickly have a chit chat, a water cooler moment of, how would you have handled this? So they're constantly learning. Well, that's gone. If they're sat at home, which a great vast volume still are, certainly here in the UK, you haven't got people next to you. You're making your call. Are you doing enough of the right activity, great productivity to create the outcomes the business wants? And how's your manager coaching you? And how are you learning? How do you onboard someone? So I think there's a real stronger drive right now for sales enablement and empowerment tools in a business, and there's budgets for it.
Yeah, I think that the need is certainly there. I think the focus has probably been on the wrong end of the equation. Activity is one of the elements.
Yeah, well, sales is a numbers game, right? Agree or
That's what
not?
I've been told.
Agree or not? And I think the answer there is, and we've spoken about this before, well, it is, but it's not. But what do you mean by that?
Yeah.
Because it isn't. You can't deny it's a numbers game. You can't, well, argue that one. But what do you mean by it's a numbers game? And too often, in my experience, what I've heard from sales leaders is it's how many dials for dollars, right?
Grind.
Number of, if you do no calls, you're going to get nothing.
Yep.
But there seems to be this interpretation that there's a direct correlation between just pure volume of activity to results. So it's that it's a causation effect, and there's a big difference between correlation and causation. And we could spend an hour talking about that, I guess. But in simple terms, I always question someone. They say, "Well, we need to do more calls." Okay. Well, before just doing it, why? And I know what the answer is going to be, right? It's going to be, well, previously we know that when our SDRs did 50 calls a day, they would get, pick a number, 12 connects, and they would get 4 meaningful conversations off of that, and they get 1 lead. And it's got harder, therefore we need to do more calls. Well, that's one dial, but there are other dials within that. As in, are you dialing the right persona? Are you mentoring and training them to have better quality calls? If it's the old get 1,000 monkeys and they'll type, infinite monkeys, infinite typewriters, they'll type Shakespeare. Would you just hire loads of salespeople, just tell them, make as many calls as you can.
Right.
There's a qualitative element, right? Your thoughts on that?
Because that person who says that is typically a veteran, and they're assuming that those calls are going to be at their quality, not at the rep's quality. And and I always look at activity. Activity is like getting up in the morning. You got to get up in the morning. You got to show up. But
Yeah.
then it usually matters how well you do things,
And what
especially
you do.
today.
And what you do, right? Because we've all witnessed, I guess, or I've certainly seen, one of my other bugbears in this is to link in communication and conversation, which I'm sure we would have spoken about before, is the volume of electronic communication that goes on. And
Well,
sitting at home, it's really easy to do, right? Because then there's no interruptions, there's no kids, there's no dogs barking. So a customer emails you. Guess what you're going to do? I bet I will put cash down. You'll email back. How
yep.
many of you go, actually, ping them back, or just pick up the phone? If you know them, pick up the phone or ping them back. So, fantastic questions you've got there. Are you available for a call now or one of these times? That's a conversation. What you're doing with emails are communication and can be misinterpreted, and you're not building rapport. You can't build rapport electronically, right? There's no voice, there's no face like this.
It's tone
It, it,
deaf,
it's
right?
hard. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And its stimulus response is typically a reaction instead of a thought that goes into it. And what I always thought of, like in that gamification space, is don't tell people what the game is based on. Just give them the score at the end.
Yeah, that's a good valid point, because the danger, you can gamify the gamification.
Well, exactly. It's Goodhart's law. It's like once
Yeah,
you start focusing on a number, the number no longer has any value.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
the number of calls.
yeah,
Early in my career was hit the button before you go home, so you had the number of dials.
yeah, yeah. Well, what we're finding, it's interesting because data, it's about being data driven, right? But turning that data into something meaningful. Too often people are analyzing. I've watched this where the spreadsheet after spreadsheet after analysis and the stuff, and it's, you can overanalyze it, get the data, and then turning it into something meaningful, particularly in my opinion for salespeople. And you described younger salespeople, perhaps in an SDR role, and those who are new in. It's how many get given spreadsheets and results or behavior correction after the effect. And what I mean by that is it's no good at the end of a month or as you get towards the end of the hockey stick saying, yeah, you haven't made enough calls, we haven't seen enough activity, you haven't done enough outreach in this way. We typically expect these KPIs, but you haven't been doing it. You need to know all the time, how am I doing against what are the KPIs? What are the cadences you as my divisional manager expects of me? So I know what's expected of me, and the right cadences of productivity that drive the activity based on the normalization of the team. You can see across the team, the people who are doing this type of thing are productive, therefore those drive the KPIs. Great. What transparency of I know what they are and you know what they are, and then transparency of where am I at against them all the time. So if I start falling behind, I can start catching up. You think of a runner in a race, right? I can tell I'm falling behind. I'll up my pace a little bit. Doesn't mean I sprint the whole race, but
Right.
I can take corrective action along the way, steering that ship. Don't try and steer the ship when it's about to hit the iceberg and it's a meter away. Well, don't tell me then. Tell me way back then.
And that's it. You're a runner.
I'm not. That analogy just came out of my head.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm a runner also. And the runner and the sales analogies can almost be orthogonal because sales is not labor, sales is performance, meaning,
Yeah, yeah, I get it. Yeah,
right, like rowing is labor, running is labor, meaning it's distance over time. Okay. Sales is performance, it's revenue over time. So there's that artistic performance element that numbers can't, except for the outcome, really describe.
yeah. There's more variables going on, right?
Yeah. And I think the pendulum has gone so far to just the numbers, and then the reps game the numbers. And then the managers say, well, we got the numbers, but we don't have the output. Then,
Yeah, yeah. What would you prefer? Yeah, you're right. The output or the activity? Well, activity is important, right? Measuring it and driving the behavior. particularly if people working at home, is important, but it isn't the only thing to consider, and it isn't one metric. And that's the thing, I think, and different salespeople work different ways. So it's interesting the conversations I'm having with sales leaders right now around how are they engaging with their remote staff. And what I'm finding is it's this video stuff. They defaulted to, well, I'm doing a video call. We're doing a weekly call, and then I try and chat to each of them one to one, etc. But that's great. But what are you doing to give them visibility of what's expected of them in a simplistic way? And oh, they got their CRM, okay, and how good's the dashboard? How clear is the visibility? And it's not right. CRMs have a place, but too often that's the only thing they're relying on, and people are interpreting that it's not clarity. I'm hearing so many conversations with people saying, yeah, there's confusion. We're
Right.
not giving them clarity with where are you and what do I expect of you, and how's your colleague doing as well. That's the other thing, is people want to know, particularly in SDR teams, how am I comparing against the others? Where do I sit? And who's, oh my God, how are they doing that? George, how are you doing that? Sue, can I have a chat and see what you're doing? You're streaming ahead. I want to be up there on that league table. I want to be up there. It prompts engagement and conversation and crossways with those people that normally sat next to you.
And I think people aren't including the most important activity, being thinking, because what managers give is probably 60 hours of work and 40 hours to do it. And then there's zero time for thinking.
Yeah.
So everyone focus on, I got to do what my manager sees. Otherwise I get kicked, and I don't want to get kicked. And it just kind of becomes mandated mediocrity, and instead of exceptionalism. And I think everyone gets online and they see how the company in the tornado is doing it. Well, they get inbound, they got brand recognition, they got product market
Yeah.
fit, they've got momentum. That may be you. If it is, congratulations. But if it isn't, if it's the rest of us who nobody knows who we are, what we do, why you need it, and they're not easy to talk to, their
Yeah, but
creativity.
yeah, and what I find, to be, if you're not getting the inbounds, what I find in the larger brands, to your point there, is it's easier to often to get the customer conversation,
Yeah.
but that doesn't mean you're going to get the outcome you want, right? It's about having the right problem, the trained people, the quality sales engagement with the individual you get hold of. So great, you can get hold of them easier, okay? But now what do you do with it?
Yeah.
The ball's in your hands, right? You've been passed, you've got the ball, okay? But if you now fumble it and don't know what to do with the ball, same outcome. You might as well not got hold of them. In fact, you could be doing more damage longer term for your brand and your opportunity.
Well, let's take your team, for example. What have you
Yeah,
done? Because you're in a new role,
I am.
and you
I
have
am.
to kind of assess it. They brought you in to do something, right? Probably grow it.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, so my first thing in coming in is to assimilate where you're at, right? Is not to be a bull in a china shop. And I've done this many times to companies that don't have a brand that everyone knows what you do, which to me, you can turn as an advantage because there's no preconception of the suspect customer of, oh, I know what you're going to talk to me about. Well, you don't, because you haven't heard of us. So there's a pro and con of being known or not being known. You just turn it to your advantage. Yeah, I'm building a team out, and I've been looking at all of these, having conversations with prospective customers myself. But as I build the team and put people in place, looking at all those dials. What dials in the environment we're in today, and where do you focus? I'm not looking at, oh, I just need to do this, just get someone in and do this much activity. I'm looking at what is the right activity. That's the bit I've been analyzing. Who is the right, you use the word first, who is the right persona customer, who's the most likely to buy from us and to get the most value.
Yep.
Right, let's narrow this down, because what I don't want to do is say do loads of activity and oh yeah, I did all this stuff, but it was pointless because it was to the wrong persona, and so less of it will be sticky. If we can target who is the most likely person who's going to get value and understand our message, and then what is our message? What is that opening message that gets them to want to talk to us? What's the reason that they will want to talk to us, not the other. We know the reason we want to talk to someone else, right?
You got that done the first week.
That's the easy part, right? Is I want to speak to you to figure out if we can give value to you, if you have the right systems that we can plug to. So go through those gating factors, and then if I can convince you and build the need that there's value in what we offer to you, that the value outweighs the cost that we're going to say it is. But before that is, well, who is that ideal customer? Let's not go after the universe. Let's identify who our target smaller universe is, and then why would they want to talk to us? Why would they want to talk to us? And how do we communicate that to them to get them to want to have the conversation in the first place? Because I'm confident if we're talking to the right person, we will have a meaningful conversation, even if it means we qualify outright, where we mutually agree that it's not the right timing. So what I'm after is having conversations with people that aren't necessarily in the buying mode, but that are the right audience that might want to buy something now. They might want to buy something later, but the conversation has value to both parties in having this short conversation. And it's not, I want to take all your time. It may be a 15-minute call, and then we book to call in a month's time. There's and I've got a few like this where I've had the conversation personally, and the qualification has been, there's value in you talking peer to peer, because you can learn and make a new contact. You don't have to be buying something to talk to someone. And then off the back of that, if there is something, right, well, let's take that to a later conversation. I said 15 minutes, great. Do you think it's worth? Oh, yeah. And a lot of them are saying, yeah, let's have another conversation. Let's talk next week.
But they all have the pain that you solve. Everybody who's a sales leader wants to do more revenue, more meetings.
Correct.
More deals.
The qualification for me is, A, have they already fixed this piece? B, have they got other things higher on their agenda? Right? Because they're not expecting to speak to me. So they're not sat there. Who's sat there going, right, I wish someone had called me and talked about something, because I've got so much
I'm dying to learn about sales tech.
They've all got busy profiles, and I've been talking to people again. Well, actually, we're looking at sales, the Gong and Sales Loft type project. We're evaluating those at the moment, blah, blah, blah. It's, well, I'm not going to shoehorn mine above that agenda. They've already identified that. That's great. When would that fit? This is where we'd fit. And I've got a couple where it's, let's talk in about 8 weeks' time. When we've got past that, we know we've made a buying decision, and that bit's being underway. And then this sounds interesting as perhaps something else that now we could look at being next on the agenda. I'm happy with that.
And do you run into sales ops or sales enablement? Are they the decision maker? Or are they just involved? Or
typically getting involved? Typically, it's the sales leader, right? To your point of who owns the bottom line end result. But then you will find I've had finance directors getting involved, right? Because for us, it's data driven, turning data into meaningful engagement and motivation for the sales team. Well, some of that data often comes from finance, the numbers, what are the results? Where is it stored, right?
Yeah.
Where is that data? We need to get to it. And so sometimes it's finance, sometimes it's sales ops, depending on the size of the company. And other times we've even had the owner of the business.
Yeah.
Because it's pretty important. Revenue is pretty important to the owner of the business, depending on how hands-on they are and the size of the company.
So how do you keep your team focused on getting better and not just being busier?
Sure. So for my style is and I respect the teams are different sizes. I, as you'd be aware from previous conversations, help smaller companies. So I don't have 200 salespeople that I'm running, right? So I can be more hands-on. And right now I'm doing demos and getting hands up, because I like to know what it's really like. The servant leader, if I understand the problems, I can remove the obstacles. I can appreciate, right, that's really an obstacle. That's not an excuse. That's not your excuse kit bag. And it's understanding where are the important obstacles to remove for sales.
Yeah.
Rather than the ones that are niggles but aren't having much of an impact. What are the real things to do? And also supporting them in coaching, right? I love engaging with customers. So getting on calls with them where appropriate, not being on every call and micromanaging them, but getting them and coaching them to understand there is nothing wrong bringing someone more in on a call. I had my CEO on a call earlier today because I'd done the first few calls demo, but there were some things where I thought, you know what, it will add value. And for me, it also expands the engagement with the customer with your business. They're not siloed. You're the only person that they've ever spoken to at your company. There is nothing wrong with bringing someone else in to give more value to the customer in those conversations. It doesn't undermine you. It doesn't mean you're not capable. You should see it as it is an asset you're bringing to the customer.
And what do you typically see the coaching focusing on? Is it listening skills? Is
Oh
it
yeah, yeah, yeah. Questioning and listening.
yeah.
It's for me. If I hear another salesperson say, "Oh, this is my pitch and this is how I pitch," it's like, no. Ask questions.
Yeah.
Listen for what the question needs to be about, and then ask questions. I'll give you an example of a call, a recent call. So during the call, going great, lots of buying signals, talking positively. We like it. We see where it fits. We're doing this, and a small thing was mentioned, and in the conversation, and then passed on was, and yeah, because we need to get some slides together. I think we've got everything we need for the board meeting. But yeah, great. Carried on the conversing. I'm bringing it back to that because I just heard
Yeah.
board meeting. When is the board meeting?
Yeah.
And how does that typically look? And what do you take to it? And do they know this conversation's taking place? Right?
Yeah.
And what's their involvement been? And how do you feel? What normally happens in those? Is this sort of the thing that would go through or whatever? Because you've been in them before, I haven't. Is there so many questions? One thing, board meeting, one trigger, loads of questions to ask.
Yeah.
And people, I watch people go, oh, yeah, and they said they're taking it to the board. But I really did really well. And we had the call, and they said they like it, and they're taking it to the board meeting.
Well,
Okay.
that's such an art of the conversation, talking about what the other person cares about, because the momentum that it builds will naturally blossom into things that you care about. But typically people just want to
But it's
quickly
listening,
move.
right? But it's active listening, Brian, right?
Yeah.
I have people just, you look in the CRM notes often, and you'll see that bit in there, and you go, okay, when the obvious one is, when's the board meeting then? Well, it's what I got. It's this month. Okay, when? Do you mind if I ask that? What date's that? It's not a hard question. It's not a challenging question, right? It's not something that they go, oh, I'm not telling you that. How much is your budget is one where, it's a harder question, but what date is it? It's a soft question. And it's about, for me, asking questions. And I actually phrase it to the customer, do you know what? I wouldn't, and maybe it's just my style, but I would, I've got some questions I need to ask you on the back. I wouldn't be doing my job well if I didn't.
Well,
I've got to ask you now. There's soft ways of introducing it so they know you're doing a good job. I've even joked to people recently of, so I've got to ask you. So it sounds like you like what we've got and all the stuff. I'm enjoying our conversation, and been great talking to you. I really appreciate the time. But if I can, I'm sure you get your salespeople too. So I've got a CRM system set in front of me, and there's a date field. And rather than guess when I think and assume you might be making it, can you tell me what date I should put in there? Because you know better than me, right? Because they know you're doing it, but you don't tell them. So what do? You skirt around it. Tell them why you need the information, particularly as SDR. There's nothing wrong saying, look, really great conversation. Build the rapport. I've noted our conversation down. It's really important we capture that information. So, and I'm going to go over my notes later, and I might come back to you with questions if there's anything I feel I've missed. Is that? And they're not going to say no. But one of the things I'm just putting on here, and I'm scratching my head on, is the date that if we were to do business. I'm not trying to get you to commit to anything. If we were to do business, the date by which that would likely happen. And guess what? The date you now put, if you get asked, well, why did you pick that date? It isn't, well, because it's towards the end of the month or the end of the quarter. I've got 23 ops, then all the 31st of March. Why is that on the 17th? Well, because I asked them. And they
Well,
said they want
it,
to get it done by then. There you
yeah.
go.
And if they just say December 31st, you're better off knowing now that, you're thinking Q1, they're thinking Q4.
But that straight away, right? You probably there go September 31st, Brian, if you don't mind, that's the end of the year. Is it really, do you mean sort of towards the end of the year? Because that's a
Right.
very specific date. And over Christmas, you and me probably won't be in, right?
Yeah.
And you won't want to do the paperwork. So it's not that there's, do you mean you want to get it done before Christmas, or you just don't know when this is going to get done, or it must be done this fiscal, or what do you mean by that? There's a question again.
Now, how hard is it to change that behavior? Because it's one thing to know it.
Yeah.
It's another thing to know it before you misstep again. Right. We
So,
all lose our keys. We all lose our cell phone. Right. We
yeah.
all know we should always put it in the same place. Right.
So here's my opinion on that is one, do you just flick a switch and they're doing it? No. How do you get them there? Well, that's the two part. It's ongoing, consistent coaching and motivation, right? And for me, the way I've always done this with my teams is acted that behavior internally and not with a stick. So, for example, I doing a deal review with them. I've so many examples in my head of people who've worked for me in the past. So coming into the office and go, just a great call with this and this. I want to ask a question about this here. Firstly, I'll slow them down a bit. Go, okay. So you said, it's this quarter deal. Why is it this quarter deal? Oh, because Dunham. Great.
Because
They
I
go,
need it.
and when have you put it in as closely? Oh, this that. Okay. What? I'll just ask them some questions. I'll go through it as though I was talking to the client. And often I've had salespeople who've worked for me for years go, got it. And then they'll go, like halfway through the question, oh, yeah, all right, I'll come back to you. But it's given that it's helping them by coaching, but I'm
Yeah.
not punishing them saying, well, why don't you get that? Why don't you get that? I'm not making them feel foolish. I work with them to educate them. I'm going to ask you questions of stuff, and it's and you'll have stuff that I wouldn't have asked, and we've all got different experiences. So it's not that I'm perfect, but if we all challenge each other, or you do it with each other, it's looking for white space. The less white space you have, the less risk there is in an outcome that's unexpected. Doesn't mean you're going to win it because you've got all the
All right.
data.
Yeah.
It may mean you qualify out earlier. It may mean you've learned something that says, ask the customer this then, because we've got that much information now, you can challenge them and go, I don't think you are going to end up selecting us for this. What? And often I've had customers qualify themselves back in and defend, no, we will. Really? Well, I don't think you will because you've said this and this, and we don't do that way. And that's come out in what I'm seeing. And I say to salespeople, if necessary, you can get a manager on the line for that, right? And say, look, I wanted to introduce them to you. I hope you don't mind, Bob. Sue's been having a great conversation with you, and she's spoken very highly of how open you've been with us. But I've looked at this with her, and we've sat down because we have conversations you should expect about you, and us doing business together. And we invest that time, and through doing that and having a conversation, I wanted to get you on the line together, because it just looks like there's things here that say we're probably not going to end up doing business together. And the customer's going to question it. Either they're going to say, yeah, you're probably right, I'm getting that feeling as well. Or they're going to challenge you back. Well, why do you think that, Ian?
Yeah.
Well, unless Sue, this is the information. And they may say, oh, no, Sue, you've misunderstood that. Oh, fantastic. Thank you so much for that. Sue, that's great. We hear that, right? It's not a punishment of Sue. There's something, or they'll fight back.
Right.
They'll convince you why they're going to do business with you, but now you're building a relationship and you're being transparent and open.
Yeah.
It's not rocket science, not any of this stuff, right? Talk to people.
Well, it's a skill. It's a performance. Great. Hey, it's been a fun conversation, Ian. Where can people go to connect with you and learn more about your work?
Sure. Yeah. So business-wise, please, if you're interested in sales motivation, I'll do my advert in 10 seconds, and how to engage your salespeople, come and see us at oneupsales.co.uk. And for me personally, ianmoyse.co.uk. You'll find me on LinkedIn there.